There's the red light. We're back again. Good morning, everybody. We're studying the book of the prophet Jeremiah, and we're in chapter 4. I'll just recap yesterday, beginning in verse 3. For thus saith the Lord to the men of Judah and Jerusalem, break up your fallow ground, and sow not among thorns. Circumcise yourselves to the Lord, and take away the foreskins of your heart, ye men of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Lest my fury come forth like fire and burn that none can quench it, because of the evil of your doings. God tells Jeremiah to say to Israel in verse 5, beginning today's lesson, declare ye in Judah and publish in Jerusalem, and say, blow ye the trumpet in the land, gather together and say, assemble yourselves and let us go into the defense cities. He's saying, hey, get ready. There's war coming. There's a war coming because you won't do what I say. Because you won't return to me. The theme of this book so far in the entire first sermon, and now he's in the second sermon under King Josiah. And he's preaching to all the prophets, the priests, the rich people, the prominent families, the prominent men, their wives who are already baking cakes and sacrificing to the Queen of Heaven, and men who are worshiping the sun in secret, Ra and Isis, he's telling them to come back to me. Return to me. You quit doing what you're doing. Put away thine abominations. Quit doing what you're doing and come back to me, and I'll take care of you. I'll be good to you. You have left me and played the whore with other gods, but if you'll just come home, it won't even be like it used to be. I'll make it better for you than it used to be. I'll make it better for you than you ever had it. Just come home. He says the same thing to us today. Just come home. Return, come back. Well, because they would not return, he's saying, okay. Verse 5, declare ye in Judah and publish it in Jerusalem. Let everybody know. And say, blow ye the trumpet in the land. You blow the trumpet to call the assembly, to get everybody together, because it's time to go fight. It's time to man up, to put on your armor, to grab your artillery and your sword and all this stuff and get ready to go out to battle. Cry, gather together, and say, assemble yourselves. They're supposed to muster, in other words, and let us go into the defense cities. There were around Jerusalem, most prominent among them was a place called Lachish. I think I walked through a spider web or something when I was doing my morning walk. I don't know exactly, but the top of my ears tickle, and I feel like, you know what I mean? You get the creepy crawlies. It's not quite daylight yet, so you can't really tell what's going on. So you're going, trying to brush everything off while you're walking down the road. I live in a quiet neighborhood, and there are a lot of trees that overhang. And so maybe a spider web hanging down out of one of those trees. I don't know. But whenever something like that happens, you feel, you wash off and everything, and then but you still have the creepy crawlies. You feel like something's crawling on you. If a spider walks across my forehead, comment and tell me so that I'll know that I can, But assembly said, let us go into the defense cities. Lachish was the most prominent and the most mentioned. There were several cities that really formed a ring of outposts. And they were basically on three sides of Israel, of Judah rather. Of course, they had the sea on the west, and it went from the north and the east and the south. They had a series of outposts. It wasn't anything as organized as Hadrian's Wall or the Maginot Line or something like that. No, but there were cities that any invading army would have to take before they got to Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, in the famous, years before this, about 100 years before this, when the Assyrians were conquering the world, they had already taken Israel, the northern kingdom, into captivity with their capital of Samaria. And now have invaded Judah, and they had destroyed and burned some of the defense cities, and one of them was Lachish. And they had made it all the way to the wall of Jerusalem. And their general, Rabshakeh, was yelling up at good King Hezekiah's men on the wall and saying, hey, your God ain't going to save you. I'm going to starve you out. I'm going to make you eat your own dung and drink your own piss until you come out here and kiss my feet. Well, he didn't do that because the Lord took care of him. You see, the battle is the Lord's. God changed things and made him go away. Now, that's what they're talking about when they're talking about going into the defense cities, these outposts, where they would fight there first and try to weaken the enemy. It was never the intention to defeat the enemy at a defense city. It was to slow down the enemy so that runners and messengers and stuff could go gather other people up and get them into the walls of Jerusalem, where they would fight from the walls and fight a unified effort. It was the day of the great cities, you see, and they had giant walls. That was the only way that the Macedonians could defeat Troy, as they got the horse inside, the so-called Trojan horse, with the men who opened the gates and set the city on fire, because they could not penetrate Priam's walls at Troy. Not the Spartans, not the Macedonians. It was the Spartans. Go tell the Spartans. It was the Spartans. I'm sorry. I got my history. Well, I was only like 300 years off in my history. Macedonians were Alexander, and that was quite some time later. But the point is about the cities. They would get all of their subjects and stuff into the walls of these great cities. And Hezekiah had really strengthened the walls of those cities, and so had Manasseh in his last days. But Manasseh was Josiah's grandfather, and Josiah is the king now. It's been some time since any work had been done on the walls. But that was the practice back then. To fight at these outposts, gather intelligence, send back to the city, get everybody rounded up and back into the city so they could make a stand against the invading army. And that was how they were fighting this campaign. Assemble yourselves and let us go into the defense cities. Verse 6, set up the standard towards Zion. The standard, the flags, the banners, the battle regalia, the ensigns, hold them up towards Zion, which is pull all the people out of the defense cities and send them to Zion, to Jerusalem, so they would be in the walls. And he says, retire and stay not. In other words, get out of there after you've done this. Get out of there as quick as you can and come into the walls of Jerusalem. Retire means to retreat or to withdraw. In military terms, when they say someone is retiring, it doesn't mean they're getting a gold watch at a rubber chicken dinner. It means they back away, they retreat, they withdraw from the field. For I will bring, stay not, which means don't wait, don't hesitate. It could also mean stay not there, but that's not the intention of this. For I will bring great evil from the north and a great destruction. He is going to bring the armies of Nebuchadnezzar, who at this point is just a little boy. They're dealing right now with Nebuchadnezzar's father under the king Josiah and his grandfather, and so I think one of them, I think the grandfather's name Merodach or Merodach or something like that. I've read it and can't remember, but it was Nebuchadnezzar's father that is dealing with King Josiah, and uh, at the time of this prophecy, when Josiah is king and Jeremiah is a young man is giving his messages, it would have been Nebuchadnezzar's father that was the threat. But they were coming, and one day Nebuchadnezzar the son would come with all the armies, and having conquered the known world, and he conquers them on his way down to conquer Egypt and North Africa. Set up the standard towards Zion and retire. Stay not, for I will bring evil from the north and a great destruction. Just like the Assyrians before them, Babylon had risen and had destroyed all the enemies that confronted them. If we look back in the Kings, in Second Kings, under the reign of Hezekiah, we have a wonderful uh, picture of this rising, the head of one kingdom and the rise of one king and the falling of another king. It was Assyria that was trying to conquer Judah, 100 years before this, and they nearly did, but God destroyed them, sent the army elsewhere, and then destroyed it. And we don't know what happened to old Rabshakeh. Sennacherib was the Assyrian emperor at that time, ruling from Nineveh and also commanding the armies in the field. And at the time Assyria was taking over the world during King Hezekiah's reign, some people come to talk to him. And it says, then came verse 14 of 2 Kings chapter 20. So then came Isaiah the prophet unto King, Berodach, not Merodach. Verse 12 of chapter 20. At that time, Berodach Baladan, the son of Baladan, the king of Babylon. This would have been, the king would have been Nebuchadnezzar's grandfather, and Berodach was his father, sent letters and a present unto Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. And Hezekiah hearkened unto them and showed them all the house of his precious things, and the silver and the gold and the spices, and the precious ornaments, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures. And there was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. Have you ever been to a guy's house and they invite you over for dinner, and maybe your wife is in there with his wife, and they're piddling around getting things ready. You know how it is with women. I know this is really stereotypical and horrible, but I mean, I've been married for a long time, and I've been to a lot of places for dinner and have a lot of people come to my house for supper. And it always happens like this. All the women in attendance run off to the kitchen, and then the guy, the host, he shows you around the house. He shows you his stuff, his toys, and usually he's showing you his guns or his new riding lawnmower, his zero-turn lawnmower. You have to walk outside and look at that. It's always showing off all the stuff. That's what King Hezekiah is doing. He's showing off all his toys to these strangers from Babylon. At this time, Babylon served the king of Assyria. Babylon was just another kingdom that was under this king of kings, Sennacherib, the head king that was making the worldwide Assyrian empire. And Babylon was just a little province in that empire at the time. Isn't that cool? And said, and Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah, he said unto him, well, what said these men, and from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, well, they are come from a far country, even from Babylon. And he said, well, what have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, all the things that are in my house they have they seen, and there is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. And Isaiah saith unto Hezekiah, hear ye the word of the Lord. Behold, the days come that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day, shall be carried away into Babylon. And this happens while Jeremiah is still alive, and Zedekiah is the last king, and they watch Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian army carry away everything. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Of the seed roll of the princes of the young men that were carried away captive into Babylon, there were 4 eunuchs that you know intimately: Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This prophecy came true. Then Hezekiah said to Isaiah, well, good is the word of the Lord which he has spoken. And isn't it good that if peace and truth shall be in my days? Yeah, all this stuff's going to happen, but it's going to happen after I go. And that's a perfect politician. They don't care what they do because they figure they'll be either out of office or dead when we have to pay the consequences for their erroneous and self-serving decisions, paid for by the corporations and overlords who own them. All these billionaires. And you hear Bernie talking about millionaires and billionaires. They got 4 or 5 pair of underwear. You don't need more than 2. You wear one and wash one. somewhere in between ridiculous frugality and extreme lasciviousness and debauchery, there must be a middle ground. This was all predicted ahead of time, and now it's starting to come true. In Israel. And he said there's going to be a great destruction, and of course there was, and that's why we're reading this book from the beginning, because it's not just a series of prophecies. We see prophecies fulfilled that were made by Isaiah and Micah and Obadiah and Hosea and Joel and Amos. We see prophecies fulfilled in the book of Jeremiah that were prophesied 100 years plus, 200 years before Josiah was the king, before Jeremiah was born. One of the benefits of studying the book of Jeremiah is that you can see before our eyes prophecies being fulfilled that were made years before. And we can see the prophecies that Jeremiah made getting filled in his lifetime and in secular history afterwards, and some that have been fulfilled here now that the end of the world is upon us, here and now in these last days. I'll be glad when I get my new glasses. I have to move these around so I can see what's going on. You know, I'm not glad that my vision's getting weaker, but I'm glad for the opportunity to see better. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow.